Hey everybody, it's your boy, and I'm going to be talking about people who are permanently online, and how I think they may need to, I hate to sound like a boomer, go outside a bit more. For you see, this isn't about permanently online people that have to film everything about their lives, go vlogging, have their phones up at every possible opportunity to put on TikTok or Instagram or anything like that. That's been well documented, that kind of attention whoring and perma online behaviour. That's largely benign to strangely toxic, but I want to talk about the political variety of it, the philosophical one, the people who clearly have too much time on their hands, too much thinking going on in their brains in a bad way, and come up with such bizarre things that they're a detriment to the movement that they claim to be a part of. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right, these people exist everywhere, and unfortunately they're becoming more of a problem because, well, the world is becoming ever more permanently online, and people are becoming ever more atomized, ever more isolated from each other, and not in a nice individualistic way where you're with your family or you have a small group of friends, but no, literally, you are on your own. These are definitely the types of people who may not have much going on in real life. Maybe they don't have much of a job, if at all. They may live alone, or they may live with their parents. It doesn't really matter. And in order to maybe find some kind of meaning in modern life, to find some kind of common ground with other people, to just get stuff off of their chest, they go on Twitter, they go on Instagram, they go wherever it is that they want to go, and they talk about all these ideas. And they're also part of echo chambers because, as we've seen increasingly since the mid-2010s, these political communities, these political sides are becoming ever more encased within themselves, because contrary to what people thought the internet would do, it actually is pushing people more into their own little niches than actually bringing us together. And this is probably the natural result of some of these groups who are more insular than others. This is why, for example, you get, at least on the left, where this is actually becoming mainstream, you have the NEETs taking over, the Yavoshes of the world, who are against work. Now, if it's one thing I know about old school communists, they were all about work. They were workaholics. Lenin famously said, and I'll paraphrase, "Those who do not work shall not eat." Yet now, it seems to be the mantra increasingly that those who will not work shall eat. Well, doesn't that go against being for the workers and stuff like that? It seems to me that these people want to live in a fantasy world where you will, instead of working, and having a good wage or God knows what else in your classless society, you'll all be sitting on your ass all day watching Netflix while the government gives you UBI. That seems to me the thing that they want, as opposed to trying to build something meaningful and successful. Even the utopian socialists, in their crazy regimented systems of government and society, still had you working for something that meant something, even if it was crazy. And you also see it increasingly on the right. You usually see it more on fringe sides of the right, as you would do in the mainstream. So, for example, I saw on Twitter, this really irked me. It probably shouldn't have irked me because it was so stupid and should have been ignored, but it was just a prime example of the kind of person who is permanently online, who thinks about things too much. And that is this one guy who's British was basically comparing what one man from 100 years ago looked like to a man who, I don't know, is he around now as he is in 2022, or was it the 2010s? I don't know. The man from the 20s was in reasonably good shape, had a defined chin, not quite movie star standard, but nonetheless fairly handsome, whereas the other guy was overweight and had no chin. And apparently the guy with no chin who was overweight is what the average Brit looks like, as opposed to the guy 100 years ago who was on the left of the tweet, who apparently everybody looked like in 1922. Everybody was fairly attractive, had nice defined chins and lovely hair, while the other guy was rough looking, fat and had no chin. Apparently that's what British men look like today. And in fact, I quote the words, the man said, "It's almost as if the British people have become a different species than they were 100 years ago." But of course, as we know, human beings haven't really changed that much. Yes, people have become more overweight over time, but the average Brit doesn't look like that guy. Most people are still normal. They still have a normal BMI. And in fact, by that guy's logic, the guy from the 1920s or Edwardian era, he would have looked radically different from a man in the Napoleonic era. And then, of course, the Napoleonic guy, the Georgian man, would look completely different to a man from Princess Anne's time. And so on and so forth. When really, when you look at depictions of people in portraits, whether it be photographic or artistic, what do you see? Not much difference, really. People seem to be the same. There's no crazy differences, no radical genetic changes have occurred in the last couple thousand years. The British people, and I wager most of the world, hasn't really changed that much. And the thing is, you wouldn't notice it over tens of thousands of years because that's how evolution works. It's a slow process. You don't get crazy radical changes so soon. And the crazy thing is that a lot of people like that have designs for power. They want to enact social change. And these are the people that make up the foot soldiers, increasingly, of the fringe right movements. Whether they be libertarian or authoritarian, it doesn't really matter. These are increasingly becoming ever more present in these movements, and some of them are even becoming popular online and are slowly gaining influence. How can a movement grow? How can a movement make sense to people when they have such crazy ideas as that? How can you even begin to be taken seriously when you don't have much real life experience? You don't go out there and talk to real life people and talk about their issues, get a sense of the zeitgeist of the moment, the culture that you live in, the area that you live in, and then expect to gain power from these people by spouting esoteric nonsense at them. People can actually get laissez-faire economics if you explain it in plain English. That's what Thomas Sowell's been doing for years. You can use the same old thought experiments like the butcher needs bread and the baker needs meat, blah, 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 blah. You can use all of them and explain it to a layperson and they'll get it. You can even explain communist theory in simple terms. Simple English can explain complicated subject. But for some reason, these people, because they're permanently online and because they're in these echo chambers, and also they are, and I think I'm going to coin a term that may have already been invented, they are intellectual hipsters. They don't really think about the real world when they're crafting their vision for society or their worldview. These people just want to believe and read things that they think are cool and hip in the moment. Whatever the most popular intellectual, quote-unquote, is reading, they must read. Anything that's edgy or esoteric or fights against the power or what have you is something that must be adopted, is something that these people crave, and they're on both the left and the right. That's why people like Slavoj Zizek, for example, has a career. And the thing is, it's only going to spell doom for these people because nothing is ever going to change, because nobody can understand a word you're actually saying. They can't relate to what you're saying. It seems totally alien to them. If you don't sound like you're a revolutionary from the 1920s on the left, you sound like a crazy 19th century eugenicist if you consider yourself on the right. I'm not saying dumb down your message. I'm not saying appeal to the lowest common denominator. What I'm saying is base your beliefs in the real world and try to come up with simple explanations for them. Things that don't take a degree to understand. Because believe it or not, you don't need a degree to understand any of this crap because it's really not that complicated. You need to get off the internet for at least a couple of hours every day and just experience the world in any way you see fit. I know it's hard. I find it hard. If I don't have a reason to go out, I don't go out. But you have to find a reason to go out. You need some level of in real life interaction with people and the world, otherwise you're going to be cooped up in your home, in your room, in these online forums and Discord groups, becoming ever more distant from society, ever more crazy and weird, and eventually this world that you dislike will become worse. The powers that be will get ever more powerful, but it's not just about going out there and experiencing normal life to make you a little bit more saner and normal. It's also really important that you do real life activism, because if you don't actually get out there and make the change that you want to see, then nothing will change. A lot of these people, and it's a left and right issue, but more on the right than it is on the left because, well, they have an entire activist class at their disposal. If you don't do this, if you just think that the world will change eventually if you vote the right party many times, despite the fact that this party will betray you and is not conservative in the least, then nothing will change. If you don't become that new party, if you don't subvert the party that you want to see in power and make sure that it fights for your interests, then, as I said before, Nothing will change, it will only get worse. And the more you do activism in real life, alongside interacting with normal people and being less online, less in your echo chambers, the more you can start sorting out your worldview, your ideology, getting rid of what works and doesn't work, kind of like a scientific experiment. You'll never know until you actually go out there and talk to people and get constructive feedback, as opposed to people who will only tell you, yeah, that's great, that's excellent, and retweet everything that you do in your little ecosphere. They will actually give you criticism, and you'll have to think about that and decide whether or not this aspect is right or if this one is wrong. And when you start doing that, you'll be a hell of a lot stronger for it, trust me. That is essentially how most successful people in politics work. One last point before I go. What else could be causing this problem? The internet itself is just a tool. It can't necessarily cause these issues. It's people's use of the internet, and the reason why people are becoming more atomized and isolated is not the internet's fault necessarily. It is society and humans that are to blame for that. But what else could it be? Could it potentially be autistic people maybe a bit more prone to overthinking these things a bit too much, coming to logical conclusions that perhaps they shouldn't do? Who knows? But then again, I'm on the spectrum, and I don't seem to have this problem necessarily. I do overthink things, but I don't come to crazy conclusions like the English people have changed physiognomically over the last 100 years in such a crazy way that they could be deemed completely different. Nor do I believe in another crazy thing I once saw, where a person said that the human race has evolved to handle having less fathers, even though we have empirical evidence that shows that actually the human race has not evolved to deal well with less fathers. In fact, we haven't. When a person loses their dad, especially if they're young and they're in a single parent household and he's not around, for whatever reason, whether it's death or he just isn't in their life, whether that be through divorce or choice, they suffer every time. But no, apparently we've evolved to deal with that. Yeah, I don't think I would ever come up with that in my wildest thought experiments. Who knows if it's mental illness, if it's society, if it's these people just being more prone to doing that. But I don't see any improvement over the horizon unless people change their habits. Am I being too harsh? Am I seeing things that aren't there? I don't know. I do think it's a problem, and I do think it needs to be addressed. When these people come up with these crazy ideas, don't retweet them because they're crazy. Actually look at it and realise, oh yeah, they're chatting crap, and just ignore when they're saying stuff like that. And instead try and encourage them to try and get out more, try and get them to do more extracurricular stuff. And as much as I dislike certain elements of what is now called the dissident right in the UK and the US, the one excellent idea that some of them came up with, I don't know if it was Academic Agent or somebody who knew him, but the whole basket weavers thing is excellent. It gets people together, it makes them do extracurricular activities, they make friends, real friends in real life, and it keeps them sane. It's a fantastic idea. Like, more stuff like that should be going on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be political. Just form your own little social groups, you know? Meet for a drink every week or every month. They really do need that outlet, and I think that's what they're craving, and it's really sad. And rather than try and put that into something creative, they put it into politics and philosophy. And as we know from people who are a bit hermetic, they are not entirely sane. But anyway, I'll leave it there. Until next time, it's been your boy, and I'll see you all later.